Hello, welcome to this episode of the Inflection Podcast. It's a pleasure to have Josh here with me today. Josh is the CEO of Cardboard, an online whiteboard designed specifically for product teams to plan out their releases. Thanks, Josh, for coming on board.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's get it. So, one of the things I want to dive into is origin story for Cardboard. Now, you've had a very interesting, eclectic experience in marketing, sales, product for companies like Amplify, Woven Engineering, Assessments, Exact Target, which is now the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So, a lot of companies from smaller to bigger companies. And how did you come across Cardboard, and what did that inflection look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd been working with a number of venture funded companies. So Amplify was a Series B before being acquired. Woven was a Series A. Exact Target obviously had a number of rounds, but that was super early in my career. And I started at a point where I was following folks online that were really into buying a business and then building and scaling it. And so I was thinking about the acquisition growth path. And actually, my previous boss introduced me to the parent company of Cardboard. It's called SEP, which stands for Software Engineering Professionals. It's about a 30-year-old employee owned dev shop here in Indianapolis. And they had acquired Cardboard about 5 to 8 years ago from a guy named David Hussman, who was very well known in the agile consulting and product consulting world. And they were looking for a CEO to take over and run it. And David was an interesting guy. SCP brought me in to be their CEO and help scale Cardboard.
Amazing. Are there things, so you've been working on it at this point for a few years
A couple of years,
and,
yep.
and scaling that? What are some big gotchas that when you look back, you're like, oh crap, I would not do that again. You scaled it over the years. Oh, it seems like there's several, eh?
Oh, yeah, it's painful. Yeah, I think one of the challenges for Cardboard is lost momentum. And by that, when it was originally acquired, it was known in the product space for user story mapping. If you've ever read the book by Jeff Patton, screenshots of Cardboard are in there. We were the original online whiteboard tool and largely grew organically with some AdWords optimization to a point. And then there was a point in time where the leadership really went after the online whiteboard space. And I think they looked at what Miro was doing and some of these other larger companies and thought, oh wow, we could be them. And not really thinking about, hey, we haven't raised anywhere close to the amount of money that Miro has. We can't make that level of product investment. We really need to stay close to our use case and our niche and our customer base and the eyes off the prize a little
Yeah.
bit when it comes to the market. And so when I came in, I saw that history and I thought, I get it. Like we did the surveying of customers and I went on a listening tour and chatted with folks. And I'm like, all right, we need to refocus on our niche. We need to go after product teams again, agile teams. Totally made sense. But it's just really hard to regain that momentum when you've lost it. It feels a little like surfing, I think, where if you've missed that wave, you can go, oh, I really want to catch that wave, but it's far enough ahead of you that you have to start to look around and figure out what's the next wave that's coming and
Yeah,
catch that next wave as opposed to trying to regain something that was lost.
absolutely. And that's part of the challenge I have found with the, and I'm one of those users, right? Users tend to be a bit fickle.
Mm.
You move on to the, or I'd say erase to the bottom or even stickiness. Once I move on off a platform to another tool and I get used to that, it's going to be really hard to come back again.
Mhm.
And I'm always shopping for the best deal and tools that quite honestly get the job done. Now, and there's some tools that have figured out stickiness and customers just think Slack, right? Like you have engineers that use Slack at a startup, they come to another startup, it's another tool, and they're like, engineers will revolt to get back on Slack because what and I've seen this happen, right, multiple
Yeah.
times because they're just so used to that. So every now and then you find a product or your product becomes that where it's so sticky. folks are actually evangelizing and taking it places. But getting there is pretty darn hard.
It is. It is. Yeah.
What have been some things for you over the years as you've worked on scaling this, growing this, and honestly bringing it back to life again, if I could use that term, that have been helpful?
Yeah, it's a great question. How to bring something back to life. I think you have to lean into your customer base, your user base, and figure out where the energy, where the value is at. For me, that started with some surveys in our product, doing the product market fit analysis and
Nice.
saying, like, how disappointed would you be if you didn't have our tool? And what are what are the alternatives that you might consider if we weren't around? And then what's the greatest benefit or value that you get from using our tool? And what was interesting for me is that I initially stepped into Cardboard thinking this is a tool where we are competing head to head with Miro. We're another online whiteboard tool where you can drag some cards around a board. I personally had been a big Miro user for years, and so I was familiar with that. And I was like fully intended on this is the battle. And what's fascinating is that if I look across like everyone who responded to our survey, yeah, about 50% of users said we would use Miro if we didn't have Cardboard. But if I do that segmentation where you look at who are the people who would be most disappointed if they didn't have my tool, and I only look at their responses, so not like the people who are on the fence or they're just occasional users, but who are my radical customers, my radical users. In that case, it was far less folks that would use Miro instead. And in fact, many more of them would use tools like Jira or Azure DevOps or Monday.com because they're doing a planning exercise for what feature am I going to build next. And they're turning around and they're loading all of their decision into some sort of project tracker tool. So in their minds, they're like, I want to get away from status. Like I want to be able to plan something based on the story that I'm going to deliver to my end user, but then when
Yeah,
I'm done, I'm going to put that into a status tracking tool. So I guess if I didn't have Cardboard, then I would probably use some of these other tools. And that was significant
interesting.
for me working with engineering then, because now we're starting to look at what are features that we can prioritize with very limited bandwidth. So let's really go deep on that use case instead of trying to solve this very wide open online whiteboard use case.
That's very fascinating. Very fascinating. So as you nailed down that feedback from users and you doubled down on that, would you say you saw more growth from your user base? Because those folks now be telling more folks, right? Hey, I'm using this tool, Cardboard, and it optimizes for drilling deeper into features or user story maps.
Yeah, certainly more growth from those users. I think part of what makes it a hard decision is that there are users that don't fit that core
Uh,
use case that churned. And so
churn. Yeah.
there is some pain watching the profit well churn channel from time to time. But I think where we get that energy though that I was alluding to earlier is when we look at a couple of customers that are using it in the way it's intended, and we can see the outcomes that they're achieving in their organization, and we can follow the use case through to not just usage of our tool but outcomes and impact in their organization. That starts to really light a fire, not only for me personally but also for the engineers and UX folks that are working on the product, and they're not getting yanked all over the place like they were before with constant whiplash and changing priorities within the organization.
Yeah. Absolutely. How would you say your background in sales, marketing, product plays out now with you as CEO? That's a lot of hats, right? Different hats worn. How does that play out for you now? And do you have a technical CTO type person for Cardboard?
Yeah, great question. I do have a close friend I've worked with at a couple of other companies who is a fractional CTO for us. We are small enough that it's hard to get height of caliber folks full time, but I will take part of his time versus all of 5 or 10 other people's time. He's amazing. So yeah, I do have a technical counterpart. I've had stints as a VP of product, VP of marketing, and then started my career in sales. I think I've listened to a couple of other inflection podcasts, and I know you've had some other really wonderful product leaders on who've talked about customer centricity.
Yeah.
And so I think I would agree with them. That's probably the biggest benefit of coming through kind of the sales and marketing landscape. I've also found stepping from marketing into product very humbling. I think I had a lot of assumptions coming from the customer side of why can't you product people just see the things that I see as a marketer or a salesperson, because you're in the trenches and you're having conversations and you're like, just build the feature. And when you step into a product role and you have limited resources and bandwidth and you're trying to make progress and you've got a deadline in terms of we're going to run out of either money or options, those decisions become a lot more challenging. And so I
Yeah.
think I've also developed a lot more empathy for not only the product people, but also the engineers and designers that I have the fortune of working with, and just realizing how hard that job is. Marty Kagan, I was at a conference last year and heard Marty Kagan speak, and I think he mentioned something like, at best, like a world-class product manager will get it right half the time. And that's world class. And
That's humbling.
I am by no means that. So if I think about baseball averages, like every time I suggest I think this is going to be valuable for our user base, I have to be willing to say I might be wrong 70% of the time here. Don't know as much as what I thought I did coming into the role.
And that is humbling. And I think that has a way of grounding you as well. Talk about the empathy when you're looking from the customer's perspective and putting yourself in their shoes. And also on the other end, your engineer's perspective, those who are actually building this stuff,
Mhm,
knowing fully well that you're not the authority on all things and all things perfect. I think it does give you a certain level of humility as you approach those conversations, which ends up serving you better over time. Because people can feel that. Like
mhm,
Josh is
mhm.
not full of it.
Just don't
You
ask my
know?
wife that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. But it's very interesting watching the journey of cardboard. I think we met what, two years ago or so?
Yeah,
Time flies. Oh my
it really
gosh.
does.
Yeah. And watching that journey from then to now, a lot has happened, a lot happening in the AI space and cutting edge tech. Are there some things on the horizon that you are particularly, if you're willing to share, excited about on the cardboard side with regards to future tech?
Yeah, I can speak to it. We don't have anything that's publicly available yet within the product, but we're doing some beta runs. Yeah, my UX team and I did a deep dive on kind of AI patterns. I'm a huge ChatGPT user.
Right.
I've been using it since the beginning, loving it. And what I've noticed though within the online whiteboard space is that everyone is seems to be putting it into their product, but a lot of times it's very hand wavy. It's like we have AI, but it's not really specific in terms of what am I going to use that AI to accomplish in our space. One of the things we've been working to do is to build it into the product, but in a very focused capacity. So think in terms of we are building frameworks for that product people think in. So user story maps and product roadmaps and mind maps, since we have all these templates within our tool. And so we think it's much more compelling to leverage AI to help us add to a user story map or add to a mind map. So when we're crafting the prompts and the API back and forth with OpenAI, we're specifically building those prompts around product best practices so that as a
Yeah.
product leader, as you're interfacing back and forth with it, it's not just like general chat GPT. It's
Yeah.
like, how do I build a better, more compelling story map for my next feature release so that I get budget and buy in from other executives so that the engineers and designers understand what the user stories are that they're expected to build, and so that we have shared understanding as an organization. And so we're seeing much more interesting, I'll put it. I don't know that we've nailed it yet, but
Yeah.
the user feedback has been much more interesting and compelling in those tests than just like the general AI at large.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
For someone who's looking into acquiring a company, scaling it ideally, and yeah, I would say acquiring, scaling, or building on top of what already exists. What is one thing you would say to such a person? Because you and I have had some conversations around that with acquisition and growing a portfolio of companies, but what comes to mind there?
Oh man, there's so many resources out there and I've barely scratched the surface. So I'm really hesitant to come across as an expert here. I would just say some other smart people that I've talked to as I've tried to get better at this and I've said, "Hey, what do you know now that you wish you would have known when you started the acquisition journey?"
Yeah,
I think size of company that you're acquiring plays a bigger factor in your life experience, in your experience running the company on the back end. What do I mean by that? When you acquire a smaller company, then in some cases you're acquiring like a job, like you're stepping into it. And yeah, you're the CEO or the new owner. But if you can't afford to hire an operator yet, then you're it, man. Like you got to figure it out. You got to hire the people or find ways to get the work done. And then you got to go out and find ways to sell the work. And that's a challenge. It's very rewarding, but it's also super challenging. And if you can acquire a company that is a large enough size, and that can vary by industry, but think about like a software company acquiring something that is 500,000 ARR, you actually can start to staff it with a team where you're not wearing so many hats. So I'm a huge fan of micro acquisition and what Andrew Gazdecki is doing with acquire.com and some of the other folks that are out there. But some of those smaller buys are more challenging than what I thought to run. And I'm somebody who has worn a lot of hats, as you mentioned earlier. And so I love the opportunity to do the work and to bounce from marketing into product and design and UX. But at the end of the day, you run out of hours. And so you
yeah,
do start to hit the end of yourself and some humility and go, oh, holy smokes. Like I need to find people that are reasonably competent that, yeah, maybe I could do it better, but it's not my full time job. It's only getting 10% of my focus. And that's just not fair to my customers or to other members on the team that are dependent upon that role to do their jobs. So
yeah,
I think that just thinking in terms of the size of company that you're going to acquire starts to set the stage for what your expectations are going to be like performing on the back end of that. And
yeah.
seems straightforward now. And I don't know, for some reason, it didn't click with me until stepping into this role, how significant and important that is.
Yeah. No, that's thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire words and say the first thing that comes to mind. This words, no
Sounds
pressure.
good. I love it. I love it.
Pr- Product.
Oh, marketing comes to mind. Maybe that's because I started.
Awesome.
All great product leaders are marketers. Here's the spicy take.
Agreed. Business.
Acquisition, marketing.
The default is,
It's the
I love
default.
it. Thank you. Appreciate it. I just
Yeah,
wanted to throw those in real quick.
I
How
love
can
it.
folks engage with Cardboard? For those listening, working in product, working with engineering teams, and are looking to streamline things a little bit more, or just check out Cardboard, what's the best way for them to engage?
Yeah, cardboardit.com. Sign up for a free trial and then email me your feedback after trying it, particularly for folks. I know sometimes we all try a lot of products and can feel like no one's listening to that feedback. I am personally listening to that feedback. I am personally reviewing session experiences from user base across the product. So would love to hear other smart product leaders and marketing leaders and other folks that are involved in the business. And what do you think about our product and how can we make it better for you?
Amazing. I will also add links to the show notes for Cardboard, for your email, your LinkedIn, and other ways folks can engage with you. And for companies that are looking to collaborate or just jam with you guys to see if there's a good fit, they can, I would say, also email you, put you all in touch. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Josh.
Yeah. My pleasure.